I started the book shortly after my son died in the fall of 2006, and I wrote it. I wanted to write a book of what it was like that first year of grief. So I wrote it once or twice a week. I'd get away and write, and I did it through that whole year. So I finished in the fall of 2007, which, as I sit here in 2012, was a long time ago. So it's been a kind of extended process. The book came pretty quickly. Finding the right people to help me get it published took a little bit longer. But it's something now. It's interesting to go back and read what I wrote. I really tried to leave it true to what it was like then, and I tried not to go back and edit out a lot of the feelings I had and try to clean it up or streamline it. It was a very chaotic experience for me that year, and I tried to have a book that embodied that kind of chaos and that kind of confusion. I think I'd been told and taught that there was a sequence to grief, that there was an order that it went through. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is a kind of famous psychologist. I believe she's a psychologist who wrote about death and dying and grief, and described what a lot of us remember, these sort of 5 steps of shock and these kind of, and eventually leading to acceptance. And I went into that with that mindset of well, there's going to be a sequence to it. So I would find myself one day being pretty accepting, and I think, wow, I really jumped ahead, and then I would find myself the next day back in shock. I didn't find it to be a sequential or sequential experience. I found it to be very chaotic, and so I tried to leave the book that way, to write that way, and to leave that kind of leave it that messy. So it still is that kind of messy, and now looking back, it's interesting to read and see what I was like myself, looking back at myself. I'm interested in psychology. I studied a little bit in college, and I'm sort of I have a mindset that looks into those kinds of things. But I didn't want to write a book about myself from that perspective as a psychologist. I wanted to leave a kind of trail of breadcrumbs for people, if they were interested in that stuff, to see kind of what they saw in me. So I'm not diagnosing myself with PTSD in the book, although now I knew at the time, and even more looking back, I think there was a lot of that in me. This post-traumatic stress that I was feeling of not only my son's death, but the year or more before that, as we were kind of fearing the worst and getting all these kinds of bad news about his condition. So I tried to leave that stuff there and not necessarily describe it or analyze it or name it or anything. As I read the book now, I think it's interesting to see some of that stuff, recognizing some of what I was going through. I tried to leave that stuff unexplained so that people can, if they're interested, sort of make their own conclusions about the development of my psychology, what I was experiencing. Same thing for the development of my theology, which is interesting for me to go back and read about now.